anything you want to say real quick about Gideon's? Okay. Amen. Wow. That's awesome. Blessing. Well, we appreciate you being here with us, worshiping with us tonight. And we look forward to Brother Tommy coming. All right, let's turn to Exodus chapter 30 as we continue moving through the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 30. It's an interesting chapter here. We continue in the tabernacle and the worship there. Last week we looked at some of the sacrifices and the altar and what all the different sacrifices were that they were required to make. And we are picking up in chapter 30 with two more, I guess you would say, articles or things that they would have in the tabernacle. We'll also look at two ointments, two, I guess you'd say, ointments that they make in for that time of worship. So let's start with verse 1. It says, "And thou shalt make an altar to burn incense upon them. Of shittim wood shalt thou make it. A cubit shall be the length thereof, a cubit the breadth thereof, 4 squares shall it be." So we know that each side will be about 18 inches around it. And it be 2 cubits shall be the height thereof, and the horns thereof shall be of the same. So it'll be about 36 cubits high. 36 inches high, not cubits. That'd be pretty big. 36 cubits. Thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, the top thereof, the sides thereof round about, and the horns thereof. Thou shalt make unto it a crown of gold round about it. We talked about the crown is pretty much just, I guess, a edging around it that is supposed to make it more beautiful, more, what's the word I'm looking for? Huh? Yeah, ornate, make it look like something a king would have. Something that is majestic is another word you could put it. It's as we look at the what it's made out of. You had the shittim wood, which we described before, was just a really strong, durable wood, and then the gold makes you think of something that is royalty. Even in our day and age, if you have something that's pure gold like that, you got some money, and so that's kind of just shows the richness of what they were creating there. It says, "And 2 golden rings shalt thou make to it under the crown of it, by the 2 corners thereof. Upon the 2 sides of it shalt thou make it, and they shall be for places for the staves to bear it withal. And thou shalt make the staves of shittim wood and overlay them with gold." Of course, this was to make it portable. Remember, they moved it several times during their wilderness wandering, so everything had to be able to be carried around. Now, I want to focus on verse 6 for a few minutes because it's a really powerful verse. It says, "And thou shalt put it before the veil that is by the ark of the testimony." In Bible times, before kind of meant, right in front of. If we're saying that, we go before this, we go there, you're putting it before that or in front of that. So before was it was in front of the veil of the Ark of the Testimony. So then it wasn't in the Holy of Holies, but it's right outside the Holy of Holies, in the holy place. And it says, "Before the mercy seat that is over the testimony." Now here's the part I want to focus on, "where I will meet with thee." Now, I don't know if you just realize the significance of that phrase, "where I will meet with thee," because we live in the under the new covenant. We can talk to God anytime, no matter where we're at. If I'm in my car, if I'm in my bed, if I'm in the house, if I'm in the church, no matter where I'm at, I can meet with God. And we have the Holy Spirit with us 24/7. We can feel the presence of God. We know that God is there. Anytime we need God, He's right there. The Old Testament wasn't that way. The Old Testament, you didn't have this kind of relationship with God that we have nowadays. The reason we have that relationship with God was because Christ came and died on the cross. He brought the new covenant to us. He brought the Holy Spirit to us, as he said in, I believe it was John, that he won't leave us comfortless. He will come to us, and he will send that Spirit who will convict us of sins, and he'll be his presence among us. But in Bible times, the Lord with the nation of Israel at this time said, I will meet you at the Ark of the Covenant, on top of the Ark of the Covenant at the mercy seat. I will meet you in the holy place, in the tabernacle. So for this to be a place where God says, where I will meet you, how awesome do you think it was for Moses to know we can meet with God? I mean, just think about that. We get that all the time. I mean, like I said, we can meet with God anywhere, anytime. But to be told by the creator of the universe, the one who has led you this far from the pillar, a cloud and a pillar of fire, and has led you to this location at this time, for him to say, this is where I'll meet with you. I don't know about you, but that's where I want to be, right there in that place. So he's given this instructions, of course, to the priests. That's where God will meet with them. And that's another thing. God wasn't meeting with the whole nation of Israel. God was meeting with who? Moses, okay. Who was God meeting with at the holy place? The priest, the high priest. He was meeting with the high priest, who would then be the mediator between man and God. Aren't you so glad today that we don't need a mediator between us and God? We can go straight to the throne of God. It says in verse 7, and Aaron shall burn thereon sweet incense every morning. When he dresseth the lamps, he shall burn the incense upon it. In Revelation, I can't remember the exact chapter, maybe 18, I don't know. I have to look it up. But anyways, it talks about the incense being the prayer of the saints going up, incense on the altar. So what this represents here, this burning of the incense, is pretty much that prayer going up to God, showing the representation of it going up to God, that he is going to hear when the priest or the high priest meets with God here, that there's that aroma of the incense going up to God. And you notice he would do it in the morning, and according to verse 8, he would do it in the evenings. Every time he would make the sacrifice in the morning, and he would check the lampstand to make sure it was still oil, because remember, it can't go out. When he checked that, he would also burn this incense up to the Lord. And when he came back in the evening time to make the evening sacrifice, he'd make that sacrifice. He'd check the lampstand again to make sure the oil wasn't going out, and he would then light the incense again for it to go up to the Lord. So it was a constant reminder and a constant presence of God among the nation of Israel. Now, I want you to look at verse 8, because there's something I want to point out here. It says, and when Aaron lighteth the lamps at evening, he shall burn incense upon it. It says, a perpetual incense before the Lord throughout your generations. It was supposed to remind not only Aaron and his sons, but every priest from then on out and every person from then on out, how important it was to meet with God and worship God. Now, what I want to ask us as Christians nowadays, do we teach our children and our grandchildren the importance of worshiping God? You look at our churches nowadays. I mean, folks, churches like I won't even say it's second on priorities. I would say maybe third, fourth, fifth, sixth on priorities of most people. If I can go to church, I will. I was asking someone today, I won't say a name, but I was asking someone at work today, I was like, where do you go to church? And she kind of looked at me and I said, where are you a member at? She said, well, I'm not a member anywhere. I said, okay, where do you occasionally attend? And she told me where she occasionally attended. And she said, I know I should go more. You notice that statement? I know I should go more, but I got a lot going on. Do you notice the problem is, and I've said this before, the problem is generation after generation after generation didn't put the emphasis on worshiping God. So what you have now in church is you have half the church full, if that, and the rest of the people just couldn't care less if they went or not. So what is he saying here? He says this will be a perpetual incense before the Lord throughout your generations. This will be a remembrance, a perpetual thing. Don't stop the incense before the holy place of God. In other words, don't stop. It will be a perpetual incense before the Lord throughout your generations. Then he says in verse 9, this is important too. You shall offer no strange incense thereon. They couldn't just bring God whatever they wanted to. They couldn't just wake up one day and be like, well, I think we'll burn this incense today. This one smells like cherries, or this one smells like blueberries, or you know what I mean. Just this strange incense before the Lord. Folks, we can't bring just anything before the Lord. Y'all know that? We can't bring just anything. We can't just say, okay, God, this is all I have. You got to accept it. He really doesn't. You remember, I think it's in Malachi when he talks about them bringing the lame animals and bringing the broken and all this stuff. And God said, I don't have to accept it. He doesn't have to accept our worship. You come into church and you were out drinking Saturday night, and you come into church and you're lifting your hands and praising God. He don't have to accept it. Because is your heart really on it? Is your heart really in it? So he says, don't bring strange incense thereon. Don't bring something that I didn't tell you to bring. He tells us what kind of worship to bring in the book of John when he says we shall worship God in spirit and in truth. If it's not in the spirit, if it's not in the truth, we don't do it. I was telling the praise team Sunday night, I said, look, we will lead any praise song, we will lead any song as long as it's scriptural. As long as it's scriptural. Because we have to bring the spirit and truth before God. They couldn't bring just anything. He said, nor burnt sacrifice, nor meat offering, neither shall you pour drink offering upon. This incense, this table of incense wasn't for the sacrifice. We don't pray to God as a sacrifice. We don't pray to God as an atonement for sins. We don't pray to God as a drink offering, if you want to put it that way. We pray to God because of the sacrifice. We pray to God because of the atonement. I pray to God because he forgave me of my sins. They go to the incense altar and send that incense up to God, not for a sacrifice, but because of the sacrifice, because of the atonement. They already came past the altar. Then they come in there and they come to the lampstand and the table of showbread, and they come to that table of incense. It's because of the sacrifice that they're sending out to God. He said, I don't want a sacrifice on this table of incense. I don't want a drink offering on this table of incense. I want incense on this table of incense. I want the prayer of the saints going up. That's just some awesome stuff right there. It's specific on how they need to worship. Then you go into verse 10. It says, Aaron shall make an atonement. Here's the only time. He shall make an atonement upon the horns of it once in a year with the blood of the sin offering of atonements. Once in the year shall I make an atonement upon it throughout your generations. It is most holy unto the Lord. Once a year, he takes that blood from the offering, from the sacrifice. He puts it on the four horns of the altar. You may say, why did he do that? Well, let's put it in the New Testament sense. I should always be remembering the death of Jesus Christ on the cross. Right? That should be on my forefront all the time. When I'm praying, I should remember his sacrifice. When I'm meeting with him, I should remember his sacrifice. So every time they looked down at that altar of incense, they would see that stained blood on the altar to remind them of what? The sacrifice. Remember, the altar of incense was not about sacrifice. It was about worship. Why do we worship God? Because of his sacrifice. So that was a constant reminder to them when they saw that. And what he says at the end of this verse, in verse 10, it is most holy unto the Lord. This building is not holy because you put a sign out in front that says Mineral Springs Baptist Church. This building is holy because when you started the church, you dedicated this building right here to God. That's what makes it holy. So it's the same thing here. They dedicate. That was given to God for worship. Y'all have any thoughts up to verse 10? Any questions? All right, let's go to verse 11. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, When thou takest the sum of the children of Israel after their number, then shall they give every man a ransom for his soul unto the Lord. When thou numberest them, that there be no plague among them when thou numberest them. Now, we need to get a little explanation on this. What he's talking about is a census, to count the people of the nation of Israel. Now, the strange part about this is he says, when you number them, that there be no plague among them. Now, the whole census gave a sense of ownership. Now, if I am, someone says, how many kids do you have? I say I have 3 kids. What is that telling you? That they're whose children? My children, okay? I can count them, and I got 3. Okay, I can count that high. Can't count much higher. So I'm saying those are my kids. I'm claiming ownership of those 3 kids. Just say I have $100, and I start counting my money out. I am counting ownership of that money. So when you counted a census in Bible times, you were saying you had ownership of what that was, whether it's a king counting censorship, it was a family counting censorship. But the nation of Israel wasn't owned by the king of Israel when they get one. It wasn't owned by the people. It wasn't owned by the priest. Who owned the nation of Israel? God. So if they were to count this census without the authority from God to count this census, without the permission from God to count this census, there would be a plague put up on them as a punishment from God for saying they own the nation of Israel. Does that make sense? So God is saying here, I want you to take this atonement. Now let's go back up to verse 11. When you take the census, or the sum of the children of Israel after their number, then they shall give every man a ransom for their soul unto the Lord. This ransom would be a payment, saying that you see that you are owned by God. Just like when I get paid, I should take some of my money that I have, right? People say, well, tithe is an Old Testament principle. It is. But in the New Testament, he said God loveth a cheerful giver. So we take of what we have and we give to the Lord, and we're telling the Lord, this money that you have given me is whose? It's his. My life that you have given me, according to Corinthians, is whose? It's his. So we're giving a part to him. So this ransom, when you have a ransom, it's a payment for something. It is God, it is them given to God a payment because he owns them. He is giving a payment to God. So let's go on a little further. When thou numberest them, that there be no plague among them when thou numberest them. So this ransom, this is a sign from the people telling God, we understand that you are the one that owns the nation of Israel. If you don't give this ransom, you're saying what? We own the nation of Israel. That's why he says, give this ransom when thou numberest them, that there be no plague among them when thou numberest them. They shall give. every one that passeth among them that are numbered, half a shekel after the shekel of the sanctuary. A half a shekel is, I think I read that. Well, what a shekel is the weight. It could be a coin. It could be a weight of grain. It could be a weight of rice. But a shekel is just one of the, I guess the half a shekel would be the smaller weight that they could give. So when he says here, kind of explains that a little more. He says, you'll give an offering unto the Lord. Everyone that passes them that are numbered from 20 years old and above shall give an offering unto the Lord. I think what the Lord is saying is when you're 20 years old, you are more to that mature stage where he can consider you an adult. Where he can consider you mature enough to give that offering to him. Now, nowadays, I don't know if every 20-year-old would be considered mature enough to be an adult. The rich shall not give more, and the poor shall not give less than half a shekel. So in other words, everybody is what? Equal. God doesn't look at the rich and say, man, you know what? You got to give me more. God doesn't look at the poor and say, you know what? You don't have much money. You got to give me less. It's just a flat tax. Straight across the board. Everybody gives the same. It says, when they give an offering unto the Lord to make an atonement for their souls. Again, this just goes back to what I said before, the payment to say that they realize that they are God's. Because those two phrases they were confusing. That's why I had to look it up. You know, this ransom and atonement. It's not an atonement. It's not a forgiveness for sins. It's just a symbol. It's just a sign to show that they realize that they are God's. It's kind of like when we surrender our lives. You know, when Romans 10? I think it's Romans 10. No, Romans 12. I think 1 and 2. Anyway, it talks about being a living sacrifice. You're not going to go and kill yourself, right? No, you're not going to be you're not going to be a sacrifice. You could be a living sacrifice. But what is that? It's a symbol that you are what? You are God's. So that's all it is. It's not an actual atonement. It's just a payment saying that they are God's. We got to hurry and get through this. And thou shalt take the atonement money of the children of Israel, shall appoint it for the service of the tabernacle of the congregation, that it may be a memorial unto the children of Israel before the Lord, to make an atonement for their souls. In other words, the money will be used within the tabernacle. It's going to cost a lot to build this tabernacle. I mean, it's not going to be a cheap thing. So it's going to be used within the tabernacle to, I guess you could say, fit the bill to pay for it. Just like in the church, you know, you have tithes and offerings coming in. What's that used for? The church, to pay the bills of the church, to do things that the ministry of the church needs to do. Verse 17, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, thou shalt also make a laver or a laver of brass, and its foot also brass, to wash withal. And they shall put it between the tabernacle of the congregation and the altar, and thou shalt put water therein. In other words, it's before the congregation and the altar. So you're washing before you walk in to the sacrifice. Where am I at? For Aaron and sons shall wash their hands and their feet thereat. Don't sound like that big of a deal, right? Just go in there, wash your hands, wash your feet. But let's look at verse 20. When they go into the tabernacle of the congregation, they shall wash with water, that they die not. Does it sound like a big deal now? It's a pretty big deal. If you don't wash before you walk into this place as the priest, you could die. That's a pretty big deal. You say, yeah, that they die not. So you may say, why is it such a big deal to wash their hands and to wash their feet? It wasn't so much the washing that was it. It was the purifying yourself before you come before God. Holy ground. Think about it, folks. Do we prepare our hearts and our minds before we come to church? You know, I have seen before, you know, when I wasn't pastoring, you be headed to church and the kids getting on your nerves and they're fighting and everything's going on. And it's just, you can't get in that mindset to worship, can you? But when we get to church and we sit in that pew, and you should take a moment and get your mind pure. Get in mindset of worship. So it wasn't so much that their hands were dirty or that their feet were dirty. I'm sure they were. But it was a symbolism to God that we are coming before you with pure hands and a pure walk. It's being ready to worship God. It says, when they come near to the altar to minister, to burn offering made by fire unto the Lord. Look at verse 21. So they wash their hands and their feet, that they die not. When you tell your kids something twice, what's that mean? I ain't telling them third time. I probably ain't telling them a second time. I think God was pretty gracious to tell them a second time. But when God repeats something, it means he means it. And he really wants you to pay attention. So when he says, if you don't wash your hands and your feet, then you'll die, and he says it again, he is saying, look, guys, I'm not joking. Worship to God is a serious matter. It's serious. We tell the praise team, when you get up there, it's serious. You're not getting up there to play. You're not getting up there because, hey, I want everybody to look at how good I sound. It's serious. When you teach your Sunday school class, it's serious. When they get up there to preach, it's serious. When we worship God, it's a serious thing. That's why he says in verse 21, and it shall be a statute forever to them, even to him and his seed throughout their generations. He says this will be something that you must remember throughout all generations. That worship is important. We're not going to finish the rest of it. It's 7:15. But I want us to really realize, folks, how important worship is. I remember I was pastoring a Landmark Baptist Church, and they had foot washing. We did it a few times, and if you've never done it, it's a solemn service. But I told them, I said, look, if we're going to do foot washing and the Lord's Supper, it's got to be a serious matter the whole time. Like when we do the Lord's Supper here, it's a serious matter, right? There's no talking during it. Even when we get done, we walk out, because it's a serious matter. I wish we took all worship to God in that same serious manner, right? When we're in church and we're singing praises to God, it's serious. When the pastor's preaching, it's serious. We need to approach worship like God wanted them to approach worship, with a pure hands, pure heart, with the focus on God and God alone. It was serious there in the Old Testament. You didn't do it, he killed you. He ain't going to kill us today. We're under grace. But do you think it would make him happy if we actually worshiped in spirit and in truth? He would accept it. Because like I said, he doesn't have to accept our worship, because he's holy. And he only accepts holy worship. So hopefully you learned something from that lesson tonight. We'll finish up the rest of it next Wednesday night. Any thoughts before we close? If not, you have Brother Ken McDaniel here. So if you have any questions about Gideon, here's the time to ask. He's here. You can meet with him afterwards. Meet him. Great organization. They take great care of the pastors too. They took us over there and ate at Lucky's and gave a presentation over there. That was awesome. So we appreciate all that y'all do. You go to a hotel and you're gonna see a Gideon's Bible, all right? So we appreciate that. All right, well, let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, as we come before you now, we just thank you for this night, Lord. We thank you for the privilege of being here tonight and to study your word, Lord. And I pray that we always take worship serious, Lord, that it's not something that we play around with, God, but it's something that is about you, Lord. It's serious. It's what you have called us to do. You're worthy of it. Lord, you deserve it. You deserve the best. God, I pray that as we go out into the world that we can be that
for you, Lord, and we could be a shining light to those around us. And we pray all these things